treatment with lenalidomide improve progression-free survival and also overall survival. This study has been conducted pooling data from 4 prospective randomized trials, and the main object of this study is to evaluate what is called progression-free survival 1 and progression-free survival 2, which means the progression-free survival 1 is the progression-free survival of the first line, and progression-free survival 2 is the progression-free survival of the second line. So if we pool progression-free survival 1 and 2, we have the idea of how the disease is also after the second line treatment. And this study, which included also more than 1,600 patients, shows that there is a benefit also in terms of overall survival, something like 10% at 5 years, in terms, as I said, of overall survival for patients who are continuously exposed to lenalidomide. And this is valid for patients transplant eligible, less than 65 years, and also transplant ineligible.
Okay, let me take the lead for a question here. Okay. Actually, the maintenance policy at the initial diagnosis of you in your clinical practice,
yes.
The patient from the very beginning, according to the MSMART of Mayo Clinic, into standard risk and high risk. Would you put an algorithm or plan for this very patient, that this patient should be inevitably put on maintenance, and this patient I can skip the step of maintenance? Okay,
so I can say that in my clinical practice I have to follow the Italian Ministry of Health recommendation, so I don't do any maintenance. I do maintenance only in clinical trials. However, I regret to not use bortezomib in patients with high-risk cytogenetics. Moreover, I think that in the future, probably we will be guided in this decision to do or not to do maintenance, also by biological factors. There is an interesting biological study accompanying the HOVON 65 trial, which demonstrate that patients with a high expression of cereblon, a controversial marker of to limit sensitivity, is predictive of response to thalidomide maintenance respected to patients who do not overexpress this protein, cerebron. So I think that in the future we will be guided also by biological predictive markers.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, this means that you do not use routine maintenance for your patients?
No, because in Italy it's not allowed. It's possible to do only thalidomide maintenance, but for the reasons that we have seen before, I don't use thalidomide as a maintenance.
Thank you. Any other questions, ladies and gentlemen? The floor is quite open. Anybody? So, thank you very much, sir, for your comprehensive talk. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Professor Galvini regarding the defining therapeutic strategies in CD30 positive lymphomas, and I'm sure this is going to be a very interesting lecture because the CD30 era is taking the lead now in the lymphoproliferative disorders.
Good afternoon to everybody. Before to get started, there are still a few minutes just to thank the organizing committee for this kind of invitation. I have no words to tell you how happy am I to be here. I studied a lot about Egyptian civilization in the school. We have a wonderful museum, probably the second or third in the world in Turin, which deals about Egypt, ancient Egypt. So I am very, very, very glad for this invitation. Thank you very much again. So what I will present in a minute, we will try to summarize in these cartoons the milestones of CD30 structure and function discovery. And then we try to give you an overview of the pathophysiology of these structures in normal activated B and T cells and their neoplastic counterparts. The story began in 1982 with the discovery of so-called the Ki-1 antigen by a German group which worked in Kiel, that's why Ki-1 antigen, which was expressed on background on the microenvironment of Hodgkin lymphoma patients. And at the same time, another German groups from Berlin raised a monoclonal antibody against the CD30 antigen, which was called their H2. And thanks to this discovery, it was the Hodgkin lymphoma could have a specific marker. At the time, it was thought that it was a specific marker, but this was no longer true at the start of time went by, as I will show you. The story continues with the description in 1985 of a new non-Hodgkin subentity characterized with the proliferation of cells faintly expressing T cell markers and homogeneously and strongly expressing CD30 antigen, and for this reason this new entity was called Ki-1 lymphoma. In the 1985, CD30 was discovered not only in neoplastic disease but also in activated normal B and T cell immunoblasts and in activated T cell and B cell by mitogens, viruses, and also in graft versus host disease. In 1992, CD30 was cloned and was identified as a TNF receptor of the superfamily of TNF receptors. Between 1990 and 2014, CD30 expression was studied in the lab in several human tumors, and I will go in a minute, back in a minute on this issue. In 1992, the first clinical trials was launched with an anti-CD30 antibody conjugated with a toxin which was saporin in refractory relapsed Hodgkin lymphoma by the Fallini group in Italy in 1992. And this antibody worked very well, but was somehow toxic. But the trial that was the first proof of concept that activity on anti-CD30 antibody in Hodgkin lymphoma. In 1994, a soluble form of CD30 was detected in the serum of a Hodgkin lymphoma patient, and this was used as a very suitable, very reliable marker for Hodgkin lymphoma aggressiveness. And finally, in 2008, a new antibody called SGN35, which was a chimeric antibody, mouse and human antibody, was raised against CD30 antigen and was proven to be very active in immunotherapy for Hodgkin lymphoma. And in 2010, the first trial was raised with SGN-coupled monomethylarostatin, which was brentuximab. Here you can see that the structure of CD30, as you can see here, the CD30 structure is very similar to other TNF receptor or TREG receptors or FAS receptors, which are pro-apoptotic molecules. Pro-apoptotic receptor for apoptosis, and I want to remind you that FAS or CD90 is expressed in hematopoietic cells and is responsible for apoptotic process which take place in myelodysplastic centroids. So, in other words, CD30 sought to promote cell proliferation, survival, and upregulate susceptibility of to apoptosis in neoplastic cells. CD30 expression is added in reactive lymphadenopathies, in malignant lymphomas, and other tumors. CD30, as I told you, is also present in reactive lymphadenitis. You can see here this germinal center, all around the germinal center, the crown of the germinal center, and more in distance, the mantle zone. And you can see here, I don't know if you, yes, you can see here, you can see the CD30 positive cells which are localized in the crown of the germinal center and which are shown here in immunohistochemistry on the right of the slide, all around the crown of the germinal center. But back on the more common CD30 positive lymphoma, which are Hodgkin lymphoma and anaplastic large cell lymphoma. And we see how CD30 is expressed in both forms, but other antigens would be useful in differentiating these two entities. You can see here in Hodgkin lymphoma, CD30 positive in the red Steinberg cells, and in anaplastic large cell lymphoma, there is a diffuse positivity of this part in all the larger cells. But as you can see, Hodgkin lymphoma is CD15 positive and EMA positive, but PAX5 is positive and EMA negative. On the other hand, anaplastic large cell lymphoma, which is also CD30 positive and ALK positive or minus, depending if it expresses ALK protein, is always EMA positive and CD15 negative, PAX5 negative, and EBER negative. These markers, so in other words, allowed us to distinguish these two more common forms of CD30 positive lymphoma. Here is a very short overview of the CD30 expression in lymphoma. You can see on the left the more frequent expression in Hodgkin lymphoma, in anaplastic large cell lymphoma, and cutaneous anaplastic large cell lymphoma, but also very frequent in the diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, ABV positive in the elderly, and in primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma. You can see here that the low expression of CD30 in T-cell lymphoma, but this is not always exactly true, as I will show in a moment. And in fact, the French group was able to score the positivity of CD30 with 4 grades, score 1, 2, 3, and 4, and they were able to demonstrate that CD30 was expressed in 100% of anaplastic large cell lymphoma, in between 60 and 20% according to the degree of positivity in peripheral T-cell lymphoma, not otherwise specified, and in different percentage also in other T-cell peripheral lymphoma subset. But as a matter of fact, most of them do express at least 20% of strong positivity and variable degrees of, in general, of overall positivity. And this will be very useful for relapsing refractory lymphoma. So, CD30 expression has been found also in in a number of other B-cell lymphoma. There are some preliminary observations in follicular lymphoma, but I will be back in a moment on this issue. There are three main subtypes of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma which express CD30. The first one is primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma, in which more than 80% of the cells do express such markers. And primary effusion lymphoma also express in 100% of the cases CD30. And also the two classic ABV Epstein-Barr virus positive diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, which are ABV positive diffuse large B-cell lymphoma of the elderly, which has been described in the last WHO classification, and the post-transplant lymphoproliferative disorders, which express invariably CD30 in the 100% of the case. But I want to concentrate on the next slide in a classical, non otherwise specified diffuse large B-cell lymphoma which express CD30. This is a subset of diffuse large B-cell lymphoma which express in between 12 and 20% of the cases CD30 antigen. If you use a cutoff of 20%, but such percentage could even increase if you use a cutoff higher than 0. Is associated with ABC or GBC phenotype, but when is present also ABV genome integrated into the DNA of the cells, the phenotype is mostly of ABC subtype. And in this case, there is also an association with BCL2 positivity and the younger age, at least in one study. So you can see here these three rows: germinal B-cell CD30 positive lymphoma, activated B-cell CD30 positive lymphoma, and ABV associated CD30 lymphoma. You can see here that CD10 is expressed mainly in the germinal B-cell lymphoma, while MUM1, which is a marker for ABC lymphoma, is expressed mostly in this subtype. And when you have an ABV positive CD30 lymphoma, you also have a MUM1 positive lymphoma, or in other words, an ABC phenotype. This subset of lymphoma is characterized by the specific signature of genes which encoding for a negative regulator of NF-κB activation, and which encodes with down regulators also genes encoding for BCR signaling, BCR receptor signaling, and proliferation. And you can see here how CD30 positive phenotype gives a better outcome as compared to CD30 negative patients, both in the germinal cell phenotype and an activated B-cell phenotype, diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. Quite recently, two weeks ago, it has been described as very few follicular lymphoma which expressed CD30 positive when they transformed in large B-cell lymphoma. This is also very important because you know that the prognosis of transformed follicular lymphoma is very poor. So another very frequent B-cell lymphoma which is characterized by CD30 positive is the primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma. This is a lymphoma which affects mainly young males with a large mediastinal mass and sign of superior vena cava compression. There is a monomorphous proliferation of large B-cells which are interspersed in a meshwork of sheets of connective tissue, exactly as in Hodgkin lymphoma. The phenotype is CD23 positive, CD30 positive B-cell antigens and surface or cytoplasmic immunoglobulins. The origin of this lymphoma is from the medullary B cells. As you can see on the right hand, you can see a thymus. You can see here the epithelial component and the lymphoid component of the thymus. And you can see here how medullary lymphocytes are lying in the inner core of the organ, and probably these cells give birth to this kind of lymphoma. Primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma is very similar to mediastinal Hodgkin lymphoma, and as a matter of fact, as you can see on the right, the gene expression signature between primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma and Hodgkin lymphoma is pretty much the same, but as you see on the left, we are able to differentiate these forms thanks to the CD20 expression, CD15 expression, and CD30 expression. But this is not the real life, because in the real life we observe some indistinguishable cases between these two forms, which are called mediastinal gray zone lymphoma. And we shall see in a moment how CD20, CD15, and CD30 are able to differentiate both forms. And this is very important because if you concentrate on the bottom, you can see here the treatment with dose-adjusted EPO for these forms of lymphoma is the best treatment for primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma, but is not the ideal treatment for mediastinal grade zone lymphoma, which has a very worse prognosis as compared to the primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma. So it's very important to differentiate these two forms. And once again, CD30 enables us to distinguish those forms because CD30 is higher expressed in marginal grade zone lymphoma as compared to primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma, while the opposite, what's happened? So while the opposite is true for CD20 and CD15, which are much more expressed in primary mediastinal B-cell lymphoma as compared to marginal B-cell lymphoma. And this is very important for the clinician. But now we have the magic bullet, so-called. So we have an antibody which has a conjugate between SGN35, you can see here on the left, with 4 molecules of toxin, which is monomethylauristatin. The drug is brentuximab vedotin, which binds to the CD30 cells. It is internalized into the cells. It is transported into the lysosome. In this place, the monomethylauristatin is cleared away from the antibody. It binds to the fibers of the mitotic spindle and is toxic for the cells. As a matter of fact, in 102 patients with relapsing refractory Hodgkin lymphoma, brentuximab vedotin proved very active in reinducing the remission. And you can see here that by an independent review facility, the overall response rate was 75%, with as high as 34% of the patients attaining remission and 40% attaining partial remission. Here you can see the waterfall plot for tumor shrinkage. You can see in yellow the partial remission, in blue the complete remission, and of course on the right, where you observe a higher tumor shrink, we had a larger number of patients in remission. And of course, this result was mainly dependent, the percentage of patients remaining into complete remission after the end of treatment was much higher if the patient achieved a CR, as you can see here. If the patient achieved a CR in the black line, if the patient achieved a PR, the result was less brilliant, and in patients with a progressive disease had a very poor outcome. Moving from this results, a very important phase 2 study has been launched in US, comparing brentuximab vedotin plus ABVD to brentuximab vedotin with ABVD with the omission of bleomycin, because the coupled toxicity of bleomycin and brentuximab vedotin at the lung level. As a matter of fact, 90% of the patients obtained a continuous complete remission after a median follow-up of more than 3 years in the brentuximab ABVD arms, and 95 in brentuximab ABVD arm. However, the survival was lower in the brentuximab ABVD arm due to the overwhelming toxicity at the lung level, as was also the overall survival in field. So, moving from these results, a very large international study has been launched comparing ABVD versus the two IVD plus brentuximab vedotin in advanced stage Hodgkin lymphoma. The trial now is closed. More than 1,000 patients have been enrolled. It took more patients to be enrolled into the trial since events were too few to have different statistical significance, but the results will be very soon available. Brentuximab vedotin has been exploited also in relapsing refractory anaplastic large cell lymphoma. You can see here in blue the patients attaining complete remission, and in green patients attaining partial remission. And on the bottom, you can see here the patient free of death of relapse, free of death, the green patient, and free of relapse, the blue patient. The median time of response was 13 months. And moving from this observation, this is probably the most exciting slide I want to show you. This is for brentuximab vedotin, which was administered sequentially or concomitantly with CHP, which is a CHOP without oncovin, without vincristine. You can see here the impressive rate of CR, which was observed in 62% when the drugs were given in sequential way, and in 84% were given in combined way. But it's very striking in non-anaplastic cell lymphoma or in peripheral T-cell lymphoma, which 100% of the patient obtained a complete remission. And this is very promising, and as a consequence, an international multi-center trial has been launched comparing CHOP or CHP plus brentuximab vedotin. In conclusion, CD30 receptor is a pro-apoptotic molecule expressed in normal B and T-activated lymphocytes. It is expressed also in a large number of T and B-cell lymphoma with variable intensity. New generation chimeric anti-CD30 monoclonal antibodies are now available, combined with immunotoxin, which show a great anti-lymphoma activity and a very low toxicity profile. And the anti-CD30 monoclonal antibody brentuximab vedotin showed a great activity in relapsed, refractory, and possibly untreated Hodgkin lymphoma. But the final conclusion is very important. New strategies for the treatment of peripheral T-cell lymphoma are now available, which are very promising. And I could end my presentation telling you that some lights at the end of the tunnel can now be foreseen for this very incurable disease. And I want to thank you for all your attention.
Thank you, Professor Garamini, for your presentation. And now the floor is open for discussion and comments.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for this elegant presentation. My question is for those patients with Hodgkin disease who have a primary refractory Hodgkin lymphoma. Suppose that you bridged those patients with brentuximab into transplantation, and the transplantation went fine. Would you consider brentuximab consolidation after the autologous?
Yes, this is a good question, and as you know very well, the A30 trial, which has been conducted in a multi-center setting in Europe, has been shown an advantage of CD30 maintenance treatment after autologous stem cell transplantation compared to the cohort of patients who were treated with a follow-up only. But I have to say that this is out of indication. And I have also to see that in Italy, as in other European countries, CD30 could not be delivered in relapsing refractory lymphoma in second line. It could be only be used in third line treatment after autologous stem cell transplant. Or, alternatively, it could be used in second line treatment for patients not suitable for autologous stem cell transplant. And once again, we have a theoretic indication and a clinical practice which says a different story.
Thank you.
Okay. Perhaps I may ask you about your opinion and tailoring the treatment of CD30 positive anaplastic large cell lymphoma using the PET-CT scanning.
Well, in the publication by Barbara Pro in US, who showed a great activity of brentuximab vedotin in relapsed refractory anaplastic large cell lymphoma, patients showing a PET response after 4 cycles of chemotherapy had the better outcome as compared to patients who didn't. And there was no role at all in continuing with brentuximab vedotin if after the 4 cycles, or in other words, the maximum of response could be obtained after the 4 cycles, and the outcome was much different if the PET was positive or negative.
So you advise to be included in the tailoring the treatment, like in Hodgkin disease, for example, or not yet?
Sorry, I didn't catch it.
I mean, to use the PET-CT for tailoring the treatment of anaplastic large cell lymphoma, like that of Hodgkin disease.
Yeah, yes, this could be an option, and in this case, brentuximab vedotin could be used because this is an EMA indication in second-line treatment of relapsing refractory anaplastic large cell lymphoma, and this, of course, will be very useful to guide the treatment. Otherwise, you have to switch to some other treatment, such as crizotinib, which is very active in anaplastic large cell lymphoma.
Okay. So thank you very much, Professor Galamini. And now we are going to move to Professor Safa Ramadan. She is a colleague and a professor of medical oncology at the National Cancer Institute of Cairo University, and now she is working in Italy, and we all hope her bright and important collaboration with colleagues here in Egypt. She's going to speak on CNS lymphomas, and then we are going to have a discussion.
Hello everyone, thank you very much for having me here today. It's my great pleasure to be here today with you, and thank you, Professor Hussein, for this elegant introduction. So, in the coming 20 minutes, I will try to cover the following topics in primary central nervous system lymphoma, starting with epidemiologic data and risk factors, going through possible underlying molecular mechanisms, prognosis, current treatment options, and within current treatment options, I will try to focus on prospective trials that address high-dose methotrexate, high-dose methotrexate, polychemotherapy as induction therapy, whole brain radiotherapy as a consolidation therapy, and the evolving and very important role of high-dose sequential chemotherapy as a consolidation therapy that can replace whole brain irradiation. So, CNS lymphoma has no gender preference. It's equally distributed among males and females, and the median age is 60 years. It accounts for 1% of all non-Hodgkin lymphomas and 6% of extranormal lymphomas. Over the past 2-3 decades, there was a steady rise in the incidence of CNS lymphoma, and it's well known that low immunity is a risk factor for the development of CNS lymphoma. In fact, in HIV patients, it represents 15% of non-Hodgkin lymphoma developing in these patients. However, unfortunately, the incidence in HIV patients is declining due to the availability of highly active antiviral therapies. On the other hand, there is a steady rise in the incidence of CNS lymphoma in post-transplant patients. As you all know, there is a strong association between Epstein-Barr virus infection in immunocompromised patients and CNS lymphoma. Looking at immunocompetent patients, actually the risk factors for the development of CNS lymphoma is not known. The main pathologic type of lymphoma in CNS lymphoma patients is diffuse large B-cell lymphoma. It accounts for 90 to 95% of patients. And the main pathologic subtype is APC type, activated B-cell lymphoma type, the non-GCP type. In this figure, which summarizes molecular mechanisms that were found to be activated in CNS lymphoma, you can see that in addition to B-cell receptor activated pathways, there is also activated mutation in the MYC88, which in turn activate and enhance survival and proliferation of lymphoma cells, and this is through the NF-kappa beta. There is also enhanced secretion of interleukin-4 and 10, which in turn activate the JAK-STAT kinase pathway, ending in enhancement of survival and proliferation. It was also frequently seen that MYC is activated in CNS lymphoma patients, which could be through MYC overexpression or MYC translocation and gene rearrangement. There is also overexpression of adhesion molecules, the chemokine CXCL12 and 13 in CNS lymphoma patients, which are very important in the neurotrophic mechanism of CNS lymphoma as well as in survival and proliferation. There is also activation of BCL2 and in turn it inhibits apoptosis. Moving to prognosis and current treatment options. In this retrospective study, authors evaluated the historic progress in treatment of CNS lymphoma in CNS lymphoma patients who were published between 1980 and 95. And you can see here that patients were receiving different treatments, either untreated or surgery alone, radiotherapy alone, chemotherapy alone, and then patients with combination chemo-radiotherapy. And you can see in the curve clearly that with the addition of chemotherapy to radiation therapy, we could see some improvement in the outcome of patients. However, the median survival of the total population was still 14 months, which is dismal. The widely used prognostic scoring system for CNS lymphoma is the ILSG scoring system, which is the International Extranodal Lymphoma Study Group scoring system. In this study, investigators evaluated risk factors among primary CNS lymphoma patients, and they identified 5 risk factors: age, 60 years or younger, or above 60 years, performance status, 0-1 versus 2-4, and LDH, normal or high, protein content of the CSF examination, normal versus high, and deep brain lesions. And you can see here that with this prognostic score, patients can be categorized in 3 clear different groups. The low-risk group has a 2-year overall survival of 80% compared to the intermediate risk group, 48%, and 15% at high-risk group. What's important in this study is they observed that high-dose methotrexate improves the outcome for all risk group patients. In fact, by multivariate analysis in this study, combination of chemotherapy and radiotherapy improves the outcome, and with high-dose methotrexate, most probably with the addition of high-dose RSE. From this observation, the study group went forward with the development of a phase 2 randomized trial in which primary CNS lymphoma patients were randomized between high-dose methotrexate alone or high-dose methotrexate combined with cytotherapy. Patients at the end of the treatment received whole brain irradiation. This study achieved its primary endpoint, which was the CR rate, and overall response, which was significantly higher among patients receiving the combination of high-dose methotrexate and RSE. You can also see here in the curve that progression-free survival and failure-free survival was actually higher and significantly higher with the combination therapy. Looking at the survival curves, you can see that there was improvement, but the difference was not statistically significant. So the first conclusion came from this study, in addition to other retrospective trials, that high-dose anti-metabolite combinations, high-dose methotrexate and RSE, should be the backbone for the treatment of primary CNS lymphoma as an induction therapy. Looking at the impact of whole brain irradiation, there are a number of retrospective data, but this is the only phase 3 randomized trial in which was conducted by the German group, in which 318 patients were treated with the same induction therapy, high-dose methotrexate, and with or without ifosfamide. And then all CR patients were randomized between either whole brain irradiation or watch and wait. So CR patients were randomized, as you can see here, between consolidation of whole brain radiotherapy or just observation. Patients who did not achieve complete remission were also randomized to either rescue with whole brain irradiation or high-dose cytotherapy. Looking at survival outcomes, you can see in the lower curve that there was significant improvement in progression-free survival in patients who did not achieve complete remission. But this was not translated in a better overall survival. In fact, the overall survival was equal among all study groups. What's important in this study is that investigators observed a high rate of neurocognitive complications, and above all in patients who could achieve complete remission and young patients. Therefore, the conclusion was that the whole brain irradiation can be omitted in these patients, and the benefit does not outweigh the risk. However, after this study, there came also other studies which were mainly retrospective, in which whole brain irradiation using a lower dose, because in this study it was 45 gray, using a 24 gray, different studies suggested that with a lower dose you can achieve a better local control and with less toxicity. So, in conclusion, regarding whole brain irradiation, we remain actually in debate with the optimal use of whole brain irradiation and the optimal dose. And in fact, it's still going in prospective studies, and we are waiting for confirmation of whether or not we can omit whole brain irradiation. With the high success that have been seen with high-dose sequential chemotherapy and autologous stem cell transplantation in aggressive lymphomas and relapsing lymphomas, there was interest also to test this approach in CNS lymphoma patients and above all in relapsing CNS lymphoma. And this is a phase 2 study in which patients were mainly secondary, so relapsing CNS lymphoma. About a quarter of them had also systemic disease, and more or less 20% were actually upfront, so they were primary CNS lymphoma, so it was a mixed population of patients. These patients received induction with 2 cycles of high-dose methotrexate and Aracene, and then they went to intensification with high-dose cyclophosphamide, followed by mobilization and stem cell collection. Then intensification with high-dose Aracene and stem cell support. Then patients who had systemic disease received also high-dose Vipsel. All patients then went to autologous responding patients, of course, complete remission, went to receive autologous stem cell transplantation with a conditioning regimen that contained 5-TIPA and PCNU. Patients who remained in partial remission after autologous stem cell transplant were allowed to receive whole brain irradiation. So looking at the study results with a median follow-up of 48 months, you can see that event-free survival, the 5-year event-free survival was 40% for the whole patient population, whether receiving autologous transplant or not. And looking at patients who received autologous transplant, you can appreciate the improvements in event-free survival. The same for overall survival. So it's improved from 42% to 68% in patients with autologous stem cell transplant. Expanding the knowledge and knowing that there are risk factors, and above all the age, which is a limiting factor for the use of high-dose therapy, you can see here that in this study actually the age limit was 70 years old, and the outcome was equal whether the patients were older than 65 years or younger. And the same for patients presenting with poor performance status, most probably because these patients have poor performance status due to the disease. So it's worth treating these patients with the best treatment options that we have. Looking at the result of this study within the context of previous studies that were addressing the same topic, you can see that indeed patient population in this study were older, presented with poor performance status. At the same time, you can appreciate the improvement in complete remission rate and 2-year, whether event-free survival or overall survival. So the third conclusion from this review of literature, you can see that high-dose sequential chemotherapy followed by autologous stem cell transplant can indeed be a very good alternative to whole brain irradiation as a consolidation for patients with primary CNS lymphoma. We remain with open questions. So there are new drugs, and especially coming from the CLGB and the German group, that, for example, 5-TIPA and induction therapy can improve the outcome of these patients. So the utility of new drugs in induction therapy is the need to be confirmed. The role of rituximab, whole brain irradiation parameters and above all the optimal dose, high dose sequential chemotherapy, autologous stem cell transplantation. And these questions were actually the main questions addressed in a prospective phase 2 randomized trial in which patients were randomized between 3 treatments, either methotrexate RC alone or methotrexate RC plus rituximab, or methotrexate RC plus rituximab and thiopurine. Responding patients were again randomized to either whole brain irradiation with 36 grade overall or autologous stem cell transplant alone. These are the number of patients that were randomized at the end of the study. The study was recently presented at the Lugano. And you can see here, which is very important, that this regimen was tolerable and 91% of patients would receive the planned doses. Very important that the complete remission rate and overall response rate were better with the 4-drug combination compared to high-dose methotrexate and RC alone, as well as there were less progression with the addition of rituximab and thiopurine. Looking at overall response and complete response across all risk groups, you can see that there was significant improvement with the addition of rituximab and thiopurine to the standard of care. Progression-free survival with a median follow-up of 30 months, you can really, I think the curves are speaking themselves, and you can see that patients receiving the 4-drug combination had a markedly better progression-free survival and the same for overall survival. So in conclusion, the addition of thiopurine and rituximab to methotrexate and RC combination, which is called the matrix regimen, is associated with significantly better responses in terms of CR and overall response. This positive effect was equally seen among all risk groups. Preliminary results suggestive of improvement in progression-free survival and overall survival. Still, we need more follow-up to comment and have conclusion on the second randomization between whole brain irradiation and autologous stem cell transplant. I will just touch quickly on elderly patients. So we know also that the use of only radiotherapy is associated with very low median survival. The addition of methotrexate, at least with 1 gram per meter square, improved overall survival. We know also that there are no formal comparative studies between methotrexate-containing regimen, but in one randomized trial that compared the MPVA therapy to methotrexate and temozolomide, the combination therapy was providing better responses and progression-free survival, overall survival that was not statistically significant, and considering the toxicity, methotrexate and temozolomide is also a good alternative in this patient population. So in elderly patients, we do know that they can tolerate methotrexate high dose. And considering the complications of radiotherapy, we prefer to defer radiotherapy for patients who cannot tolerate high dose therapy or in relapse. So this is a flow chart. So it's a recommendation for the treatment of primary CNS lymphoma, so patients who are younger than 70 years old and with good performance status. The recommendation is to use high-dose methotrexate polychemotherapy. In some patients, especially those with extra CNS disease, it's better to consider high-dose sequential chemotherapy with autologous stem cell transplant. If not used upfront, it should be considered upon relapse or progression. In patients who are older than 70 but with good performance status, still high-dose methotrexate-based polychemotherapy should be considered the standard of care. In patients who are older and with poor performance status, you can consider either monotherapy with high-dose methotrexate, or if you cannot tolerate any therapy, it's whole brain irradiation. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Safa, for this illuminating lecture. Let me ask you a very interesting thing. I realized that none of the transplant trials are using TBI. Is there a reason for this? They are all using BCNU and thiopurine. It would have been logic, because if we know that whole brain irradiation is beneficial, so why not condition with TBI?
I didn't get the question. Can you repeat, please?
The transplant data, the conditioning regimen is always BCNU and 5T. And since we know that whole brain irradiation is beneficial, so why don't we use total body irradiation?
I would say that considering the toxicity and the efficacy of current chemotherapy, available chemotherapy regimens, I think it could. TBI
is not much more toxic than the BCNU and 5T. I mean only that every autologous transplant trial here is not using TBI, so I thought there is a reason for this.